guys, welcome back. If you guys remember from last time, I was showing you guys how to mix a song from start to finish or from scratch using mostly Izotope plugins, right? Last week I showed you, or not last week, but the last time that we met, I showed you guys how to put a relay on every track and then how to open up the visual mixer on the master track and basically Izotope mix the track for us, right? Using its own algorithm, and then we made some cuts and we changed the volume for a couple of things. We used our ear, right, to make it more to our liking. And today we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna show you guys how to use two other plugins, specifically Nectar 3 and Neutron 3. If you guys don't know, Nectar 3 is a very, very good and very easy to use vocal plugin, right? I'm going to show you guys what it looks like here in a second. And then Neutron 3 is the equivalent, basically, which can be used pretty much for all instruments, right? And I'm not gonna sit here and argue of whether you can use Neutron 3 on vocals or not. You can. I personally don't. But Nectar 3 was created with vocals in mind, right? Although Neutron 3 does have a lot of vocal effects as presets as well. But we're going to use Nectar 3 on vocals, and we're going to use Neutron 3 on instruments. So the first thing that you guys would do is you would basically, on all of your vocal tracks, you would just, I already have it done just to save time, but you would basically choose a plugin, go to Izotope, and basically you would put Nectar 3 on every single vocal track. You can actually, select it, and then if you hold Alt and click, you can copy it over, right? Anyways, you would put an instance of Nectar 3 on every vocal track, and then all of your instrument tracks should have an instance of Neutron 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Neutron 3. I'm going to show you guys the way that I use this, and the way that all of you guys can use it as well. So let's say you need to add some effects, or you need to make a specific instrument. We'll start with the piano. Let's say you want to make a specific instrument stand out in the mix. Okay, you want it to have a specific character. Maybe you want it more warm. Maybe you want it more bright. Maybe you just need it there for presence. Whatever. Neutron 3 and Izotope, they have made it very easy for you. I'm not going to go into detail about, what you should EQ out and what you should compress. I'm just going to use the default settings for time's sake. But obviously, if you have any other questions regarding it, you can always, let me know in the comments below or email me or whatever. Okay. But so the way that this works is it has this mode right here called Mix Assistant. Okay. And this Mix Assistant, what it allows you to do is you can choose to either balance or you can track enhance. So we're going to use track enhance right here, right? And you can either have a auto detect an instrument, or you can, if you know what instrument this is, so for example this one's a piano, right? I can just choose piano. So that's what I'm going to do. And what this is going to do is it is going to listen to this track. I'm going to play it from the chorus, and it's gonna analyze the audio, and it's gonna start making some additions to this piece. Okay, let me show you what it looks like. So what you'll do is you'll hit next, and it's gonna say waiting for you to play audio. So go ahead and play the audio. You can solo the piano too, but I'm just not going to. Sometimes I do if I need to do something specific, but let's go ahead.
And I know we weren't perfect, but I've never felt this way for no one. And I just can't imagine how you could.
Okay, so when we're done, we'll hit accept to accept the changes, and you can see what it did here. Okay, so first of all, it added a sculptor, and you can change these settings. I'm not going to, right? If you actually play it, I'll show you what it's doing here. You can change the tone, you can change the speed. I don't want to focus on that, but here's the EQ. Okay, so you can see what it did is it added these EQs right here. It cut out some of the low, increased some of this right here, right? And this right here is a dynamic EQ band. So what it does is if you play it,
I know we weren't perfect, but I've never
basically follow this frequency and make cuts, right? and then it made a few other ones, and it added some brightness. Okay. It also added a compressor here. You guys can see. You can see what it's doing here. Here are the cuts at the top. Right? A lot of people get confused by compressors. Basically, what a compressor is it takes anything below this threshold, it brings down the volume. A compressor is supposed to try to even out the dynamics of a track, right? So that the difference between the low parts and the high parts aren't too much. Now, depending on the ratios and the attack and release and the settings that you have on your compressor, it could be really compressed or it could not be, right? But this is the recommendations that it made, and then it put on an exciter. So let me show you what the piano sounds like before and after. Okay. So this is before. After. Before. After. So you can hear it. You can hear how it added a bunch of character to this piano, right? Really, what it did is it made it a lot more brighter, right? And it made some of these low frequencies up here. And I'm not gonna spend too much time here, but for example, you could isolate some of these frequencies to see what it did, right? So like if I were to do this and isolate this frequency, you guys hear that ringing? That's what Izotope found, and it lowered that frequency, right? Same thing with this one. That weird frequency that you can hear, it intelligently located that frequency and lowered it. So it's a very useful tool. It's something that you can use without even having any knowledge of EQing or compressing or adding these kinds of things to your instruments. You can just use these, right? So that's what it did to the piano, right? Let's check out the drums, okay? So the same thing with the drums. You're gonna click Mix Assistant. You're gonna hit Track Enhance. You're gonna detect. Again, like I said, if you have your drum track separated, that's probably more preferable. But because I have a program that does all my panning and effects already on its own, I don't do that. I have just one drum track, so I'm gonna choose drum track. But if you have more instruments, right, or if you have a cymbal track and a kick track and a snare track and a tom track, you would choose that, right? But for me, I'm gonna click drums. Here's where you can choose some settings, right? So if you see this, warm will basically add some more bass to your instrument. I wouldn't put this on a drum track. Maybe if I had a kick track, I would put that on there, right? This just does balanced, well-rounded processing, and then up front we'll just basically emphasize the mid-range frequencies. But I'm not gonna do that. The drums have a lot of frequencies, right? They have hi-hats, these upper range frequencies, mid-range, low. So I'm gonna put a balance, and this right here lets you choose the amount of processing you want on this track, right? So you can put high, you can put medium, you can put low. If you want more processing done, you select high. I, for the most part, will always use medium unless I feel like my drums are very dull, right? So I'm gonna click medium, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit next. Same process, right? Okay, we'll hit accept to accept the changes, and you can see already, right? So if I play the drums, you'll see the processing it did here, right? So it didn't feel like we need to do anything with the bass here, right? The kick. There's a frequency here that it decided to lower. Okay. Another frequency here that it decided to lower. So these are the effects that it put on here, right? It also put down a exciter and a compressor, right? I'm gonna say for drum tracks, always be very careful with compressing. Like, and by that I mean like, make sure you go over it and it sounds right to you, because if you just have one drum track, there's a lot of dynamics, right? So you want to make sure, if that's the sound you're going for, to compress it, right? So for me, they have to be pretty close to the same level, right? So you can see how my compressor, I like the way that it sounds. It sounds very static. It sounds, the dynamics aren't too much. Right? Something else that I always do is I throw a master meter on all of my tracks. This is just a metering device, not device, but a metering plugin that analyzes, or you can basically select a decibel, and whenever it goes over that decibel, it'll log it for you, right? I like to keep my drums at about negative 15 decibels and below, right? So I'm always watching this right here, right? I should say between about negative 15 and negative 12, right? But basically, what you want with your drums, this is just this is just something that I learned just doing this, is you want this to be pretty. You guys see how the levels are not too much of a difference, right? That's what you want. Like, if there was a part that was too loud, it'd clip all the way up here, and that's what you want to get away from. But with compression, like I said, it's gonna bring these peaks down here and increase these peaks up here to make it a more central sound, right? So that's what it did with the drums. Now let's go to our 808. Okay. Now if you're not if you don't have a if you're not wearing headphones, or you don't have a stereo source, right? It might be hard for you to hear these 808s, but we'll talk about that here in a second as well. So here's something else I'm going to show you. Okay. For this one, I'm not going to use the mix assistant. In fact, I could have done this with any of the other instruments, but I decided to do it with the 808. You can actually click on this drop down right here for the 808, or for anything, right? And it's all categorized, right? There's a bass, acoustic bass, electric bass, a synth bass, a drum bass, right? So on and so forth. Guitars, keys. There's a mix bus. There's vocals. So I'm gonna choose bass. This is a 808 bass, right? Let's see. I can either go for an electric bass, or I can go for a synth bass. Also, something else I could do is I can go to my go to drums and go to kick, and just click on the 808 enhancement. So that's what I did for this one, is I just clicked on a simple 808 enhancement. So let me bypass this and show you what it sounds like without anything, and then what it sounds like with something. Now if I choose 808 enhancement and unbypass this, so with the transient shaper, the exciter, and the sculptor, it made the frequencies right here, like in this area, pop out, right? So again, if you hear it again, you can hear the synth, right? You can hear the sub bass, right? Here's before, here's after. Right. Now let's go ahead and talk about vocals. You guys can see on my track, I have a lot of things here, right? I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't have too much time left. But let's talk about Nectar 3. I love this plugin. I absolutely love it, guys. One thing that you guys should notice about Neutron and Nectar 3 is the same concept applies for plugin order, right? It's going to activate these plugins in order, right, from left to right. But for Vocal Assistant, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick probably the chorus, right? Where's the chorus? Chorus 2, maybe. And I'm just going to use the Mix Assistant. Now, keep in mind, there are a lot of great great vocal chains here, right? It's for ad libs. You can. There's so much. There's background vocals. There's harmonies, right? There even if you go down here to the legacy, it's even organized by genre. So let's just say you're working on a pop song, you can go ahead and just choose one of these, and then you can just play around with the compressor settings to make sure that it sounds right to you. But for this purpose, I want to use the vocal assistant to show you guys how great it is, right? So if you click on vocal assistant, you click on assist, click next. So you can go for a more vintagey sound, a more modern sound, or if you're doing like, podcast or something, you can go dialogue, right? I'm going to go and choose a moderate intensity, click next, and it's going to ask me to play the audio.
And I know we were perfect, but I've never felt this way for no one. And I just can't imagine how you could be so okay now that I'm gone. Guess you didn't mean what you wrote in that song about me. 'Cause you said forever, now I drive alone past your street.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and hit accept. And let's see what it did here, okay? So the first EQ always makes some cuts around this area, right? So basically what it did is it listened to my voice, and it determined that in these areas, it needed to make some cuts, right? I'm not going to talk too much, take any time to talk about the vocal EQ. You can actually Google a vocal EQ chart that tells you what each of these frequency ranges do. But I know my voice, it's very baritone, it's very low, and it doesn't sound very good in the low areas. So you can see how it cut those areas. And then the second EQ, it's gonna make a whole bunch of additions, right? I want to show you guys a very cool feature with this EQ with Nectar 3. So obviously it added this high pass, right? But what it did is it made a dynamic frequency. So basically what it does is it follows this frequency. So if I play this right here, you can see how this high pass is moving.
I've never felt
Right?
this way for no one.
Okay. I know my voice as well, so what I can actually do is I can turn this into a dynamic one as well. If I hit this frequency button, maybe maybe drop it a little bit, and I hit play. What it's gonna do is it's gonna follow this frequency. Now you can see how I gotta move this over a little bit. It's gonna lock onto this frequency.
And I know we were perfect, but I've never felt this way for no one.
I could even do that with this one if I wanted to, right? I can make it lock onto this
And
frequency.
I know we were perfect,
looks like it
but
wants
I've
it.
never felt this way for no one.
You see how it's following this frequency right here?
I just can't imagine how.
So it's just a great feature. Like for example, if you know where your voice sounds bad, you can just have this lock onto that frequency and make sure that it's always cutting it, right? So it's a really great feature. And then obviously, I wish I was more tender-like, but I'm not. So it added a bunch of brightness in these areas, right? Made it more breathy, add some brightness. Okay. This right here, I one time went back and redid my vocals from scratch and made cuts, and I saved it. And it's right here. And you can see it's very close to what Izotope actually did for me. So it's pretty great, you guys. Like what it does, it is just ahead of its time. Obviously, it also added a De-Esser, right? There are other ways to de-ess, and there's other plugins, but it added a de-esser, right? So all the harsh S sounds, I could even lower the threshold and increase this to accommodate more sounds, right? Maybe I don't like the K sounds or whatever. But it listened to my voice in that part, and it made this de-esser. And then it added a compressor, right? Which is important, right? We talked about it last time, how there was a lot of fluctuation in the voice. Well, I needed a compressor on that, right? So like if I play this right now,
And I just can't imagine how you could be so okay now that I'm gone.
okay, what it did, is it's taking all these peaks that go below this threshold at 23, and it's lowering them. Right, this yellow line right here, it's showing how much every vocal is being lowered. Right,
And I just can't imagine how you could be so okay.
and you guys can see how it's making sure that all the vocals are close in dynamic range. What happens is when your ear listens to these vocals, any big sudden in decibel movement will be unpleasant to your ear. So that's the point of compression, is to make sure that the low parts come up and the high parts come down to make it a pretty closely knit vocal track, right? Something else that's really great, you guys, something that I love, is right here on the right is this all level, or this auto level mode. What it does is you choose a decibel. I choose -8 because realistically you want to get your vocals between about -12 and -8 probably. Some people say -10, but I'm a vocal guy, so I always go for -8. Right? You click this to make sure it's on, and it increases the level of volume on your vocal track universally to get your vocal, all of your vocals after compression, to hit around this -8 area, right? So if I play it, you can see how it's hitting this -8.
And I just can't imagine how you could be so okay now that I'm gone.
So it's really great, you guys. I mean, and for example, if you go to these low parts right here, you can see it's still trying to get it to -8, right? And what this is gonna do is it's gonna increase. It's going to decrease the dynamics of your song, which will basically make sure that your soft parts are still loud enough to a point where it still sounds audible and it still sounds good, right? A lot of times what happens is when people sing the verse, there's not a lot of volume going out, and some people struggle with trying to get that volume in the verse up without distorting the sound, right? Well, Izotope does it for you. And obviously it has a limiter, so basically you can set this limiter, and I would probably set it right here at -8 anyways, or maybe -7.5. And basically what this will do is it'll make sure that nothing goes above that threshold. So it has a lot of tools in here, you guys. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I didn't use for this track that has their own specifications, but you can add a second compressor, you can add delays, dimension, chorus, flanger, what is it called, phasers, right? You could add harmonies, right? You can choose, if you know what key it's in, then you can add. I don't remember what key this is in. I don't know if it's. I think it's D flat. I don't remember. But let's just say you know what key it's in. You can actually just add harmonies, and you can choose thirds, fourths, fifths, super octaves, so on and so forth. You can add reverb. You can add saturation. Okay. So there's so many useful tools in this, you guys, and this basically, like, if I just had this vocal track just like this, it sounds great, right? Just the vocal sounds great, right?
And all my friends are tired of hearing how much I miss you, but
Let's go ahead and show you what it sounds like, bypass and unbypass. So here's bypass.
and I know we were perfect, but I never felt this way. And I know we were perfect, but I never felt this way.
So you can hear it's so much clearer. It's a lot brighter. The dynamics are controlled, and you can also hear the de-essing that's going on, right? In fact, if you watch it,
I know we were perfect, but I never felt this way for no one.
it's just some light de-essing between about 0 and -5 decibels. Well, this is set to -6, but you can always increase and decrease the threshold. But that's how you would use this. It basically does everything for you, and if you feel like there's some things that you need to change, you can always go ahead and change them, right? So it's a very useful tool, Both Neutron and Nectar 3, they're great. They're great to use. But that's going to be it for this video, you guys. Once again, I'll link the completed video, in the description below. You could probably click, I don't know where it's at here, it's somewhere here. Okay, you can click on that and see the completed track. But other than that, you guys, have a good one, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.
Red lights, stop signs, I still see your face in the white cars. Front